I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to night 6 of the 2021 Summer Mini Skein mini-series. Tonight, we are going to play with some of my favorite acid dyes ever, neon fluorescent colors, and we are going to dye up a wonderful rainbow colorway, and I am so excited to share this with you because I absolutely love how it comes out. But before we go and start talking about today's project, please make sure that you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I love to play with color and yarn and explore different techniques and fiber contents, and I think we have so much fun. And really, tonight is no exception because we are going to explore 4 different yarn bases, continuing this theme from the Summer Mini Skein mini-series, where in addition to exploring different techniques this year, we really are comparing these techniques and colorways across multiple yarn bases. And all right, let's go get into it. Today is all about rainbows, and we are gonna dive into some of my favorite fluorescent colors. Fluorescent fuchsia, fluorescent safety orange, fluorescent lemon, radioactive, frozen blue, and purple pop. I love this combination of 6 colors so much, and I am really excited to use these 6 hues to design a fade set. I had a lot of different ideas of what I wanted to do, but I eventually settled on this speckled, variegated kind of look, which will allow us to incorporate all 6 colors into a 5 mini skein set. I want to play with citric acid speckles and use the technique where I speckle heavily the fluorescent colors on the yarn and then sort of rub it a little bit to cause a little bit of spread. A lot of these fluorescent colors have pigments that strike a little fast and then some pigment that strikes slower. And so this effect is something I've done many times and just is really beautiful and fun. As for the colorways, I think we're not going to split them fairly evenly. I think that I want to do mostly purple with a bit of blue, mostly blue with a bit of green, and so on. So that way there's a dominant color in each of the 5 skeins. And then the accent color of each skein will sort of lead into the dominant color of the next one. And I think that that'll just be a really fun set. We are going to dye 4 different yarn bases in this colorway today. These are all mini skeins from Wool to Dye For. They are 20-gram skeins. First is Crazy 8, which is 100% superwash merino. Then we have the MCN High Twist, which is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. Then we have That Yak, which is 70% superwash merino, 20% yak, and 10% nylon. This cool-toned brown, warm-toned gray base that is from the natural yak color does take up fluorescent colors really nicely. I've actually tried this before using some fluorescent colors and it looked great. I'm a little curious how it'll do with this technique, but it's really fun, and I've been having a lot of fun in this Summer Mini Skein mini-series comparing the effects of different techniques and having this yak in the mix. And then finally, I have a little bit of Sheila's Sparkle, which is 75% superwash merino, 20% nylon, and 5% silver stellina, to give us a little bit of some sparkle and shine. We are going to be using citric acid powder, but I do also want to add some white vinegar. So we're going to add a cup of white vinegar to this 5-gallon bucket of water. I might fill it up with some more water should we need more liquid. But now we are going to come in to pre-soak all of our yarn. I have secured all of the minis with zip ties. There we go. So that way we can keep them arranged for the 5 sets. And yes, I'm going to add more water here to the bucket so that way the yarn can be a little less compressed. And I am going to let this pre-soak for at least 30 minutes. Since we're going to speckle with dry powder, And I'm okay with there being some bare yarn color left in the yarn. I'm not as worried about even saturation, but if you have this much yarn in a bucket and you don't want white patches, I would then soak for a lot longer. So that way you can make sure that everything is nice and saturated. But anyway, I'll be back when we're ready to set up the dyes. To prepare our citric acid dye mixtures, first I put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves. I wear a P100 half rubber respirator whenever I am dealing with dry dye powder, and so that includes the project we are doing today. In each of 6 cups, I added 1 tablespoon of citric acid powder, and then to each of them I added a healthy portion of the fluorescent acid dye. Now all the dyes are fluorescent except for Frozen, which is a bright blue, but it doesn't have any fluorescent properties. Once I added the dyes, I then stirred them up to distribute the color, and we're ready to start speckling. Arranging the powders in covered containers is helpful, just to also prevent spills. That's always something that I am extremely cognizant of. But since we only need 2 colors at a time, this will also help me keep track of where we are in creating our rainbow. Now, all of the tools and equipment that I am using today is dedicated for dyeing yarn and is not used for food. If you'd like to learn more about any of the tools and equipment that I use, I do have links down in the video description, including some blog posts where I talk about where you can find different respirator masks or my favorite pots and pans that I use when I dye yarn at home. But now, let's go dye some yarn. I pre-soaked the yarn about an hour, and I have all the yarn for each colorway sort of connected with these removable nylon zip ties, so that way I can keep track. But once they're dyed, then it'll be really easy to keep track of the colors that I'm creating. So now I want to spread these out. And it's very interesting looking at it with, say, the yak, because you can see where things overlap and don't. So that is actually really interesting for me to see as I spread out these minis. Okay, and I think we're gonna do like a tip blue, so just about like this much, which is maybe 25% of the colorway, maybe 20% or so, and then the rest will be the purple pop. I'm planning on touching the yarn with my gloved hands, but I do have a pre-soaked in the same acid skein of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn. It's not a superwash, but I have that as a mop in case I have extra dye in my hands I need to wipe off somewhere. The reason why I decided to start with the purple pop as a big color is that it does break pink, and so that sort of will help tie everything together. But we're going fairly heavy. With the yak on the edge, it's a little hard to see. And yeah, this color does, like, it breaks, it's got blue in it, but it definitely does, it's a fairly pinkish purple, but a fun color, and actually a color that can make me a little nervous because it can be hard to get it to strike to the yarn. So it's also a color that you just want to keep an eye out for. Now I am going heavy, sort of giving a full layer of this color on the yarn, but I do want to be careful and not like fling it around anywhere. I definitely mixed up more color than I will likely need, but that is not a problem. Okay, I'm going to have a little more precision as I come in to the area that we want to have blue. And it's okay if there is overlap between those colors. So right now I don't feel a need
to wipe off my fingers before going into the blue. Since with the citric acid powder there doesn't end up being that much transfer. I'm not sure if you noticed, but when I did the frozen, I did apply more dye, and that's because frozen is a pre-mixed, it's more of a pastel color, and I wanted to make sure that there was sufficient of it in here. In general, when I'm doing these more neon rainbows, I use a lot more of the frozen than I do of other colors. So there is that. And so I don't think I'm going to intentionally try to overlay the colors, but I'm sure that'll happen as I flip this over so we can dye the other side. But this is the general feel of what I am going for. And now I am going to flip the yarn over and sort of tap. And so this is where we're seeing some color transfer throughout, and I mean, I'm okay with that. I want there to be speckles, but I also want there to be some amount of spread in it, which is why I am patting to allow the colors to sort of spread a bit. And the thing with mini skeins versus, I'm making sure my hands are dry before I go in again. The thing with mini skeins versus full skeins is that if I had full skeins, when I flip, I would have more control over how things line up and lay out with the flip. But with these, I'm going to have to check a little closer. I think each zip tie has 7 20-gram mini skeins. So that's that proportion. And maybe I should have done smaller groups to make it a little easier to flip. Just so I can make sure I get the distribution of color that I want. Paying careful attention to our edges. But yeah, this is a technique I've really enjoyed and I've played with a few times, to play with like light and dark, candlelight, or sparklers, and just having fun with it, with these fluorescent colors. Even though we're not dipping into a dark color today. I have no idea if I mixed up a good amount of these colors or not, but I think that the yak really shows how maybe uneven some of this is laid out or spread out, just because you can see that you can't entirely see that skein, and that there is some resist with just how things are laid out over here. But again, we're going heavy. Like, the goal is not super light, fine speckles. The goal is heavier speckles, but to also just be careful as I'm doing this. So I'm opening it up to just see how I feel about the coverage. And it is pretty good. Pretty good. I'm now going to wipe my hands on that mop of mine before drying them off again. And so I am okay with there being some amount of white left. I think that that also will be really pretty with these rainbows. But this is now allowing me to be like, okay, maybe I need some like hints, more color here and here. But overall the coverage is pretty good. So right now I'm actually doing something I don't often do, and I'm applying the dye going up and down, sort of parallel to the strands of yarn. More often than not, I will go perpendicular to it. so that way I can apply color to as many strands as possible. But one reason why I'm going sort of down versus across is because that's where I can see some areas where I want to have more color. So I guess I'm doing a combination there. Having more citric acid in there means it's more dilute, which means I can add it pretty heavily without a lot of consequence. And so now I'm coming in and just checking manually to see, like I see an area there where I think I might want more color. Okay, maybe that area right there, and a little bit here and here. The hardest thing is to make sure your fingers are dry when you swap colors, so that way the powder doesn't just stick to your fingers. But again, it's okay if we have some white left. I'm not even worried about back staining here. The goal is to have a rainbow that feels like a party. That is my goal. And checking in with the blue. The blue is actually pretty darn good. I'm curious, it's definitely starting to strike already. The blue, frozen will strike faster than all of the fluorescent colors, just because it's not fluorescent. And so that's just the general thing that I see. But now I am going to cover up the purple pop since we are done with it. And I will cover up the frozen just so that way I don't accidentally drip any water in there. And we're going to go put this in a steamer basket. The yarn is inside my pasta insert. Because we're dyeing so much yarn today, then I can put a steamer basket on top and do 2 colorways in one pot. But I'm going to steam set it for at least 30 minutes, probably a little longer. As for this dye on the counter, I do want to clean things up before we go and add more color. So I'm coming in with our yarn mop to mop up. I won't be able to mop up 100% of the color, but doing this will allow us to at least soak up some of this extra color in between samples, and then I can wipe it down with a paper towel. But at least we can create a fun, probably fairly pastel it'll end up, but a fun colorway with all this extra dye.
I'll show what my 2-level steamer basket setup looks like at the end of this time lapse. But the reason why I won't just put the next colorway on top of the previous one is that I don't want there to be a lot of color transfer between one colorway and the next. If a little accidentally ends up happening, that is okay, but the goal is to try to keep these colorways as separate as possible, and using these multiple levels means that I don't need to use plastic wrap. While the first set was steam setting, I continued speckling really heavily on to the remaining 4 sets of yarn, keeping up with a similar pattern, using a long section of one color and then a short section of another, and then sort of keeping up that pattern going forward. I'm really excited to see how this is going to turn out and how all of these different colors look together. In some other videos, I've shown that countertop citric acid speckles followed by steaming can lead to a lot sharper speckles than you can get low immersion. But that's with an asterisk. I'm applying this color very heavily here and touching it and letting it move to intentionally blend out these colors a little bit. Something that I don't always do if I'm trying to get sharper speckles. And one other thing you can do if you want sharper speckles is have more citric acid in your mixture of dye to citric acid. The more citric acid there is to sort of dilute that dye powder, the easier it is to spread out and get much sharper, really subtle speckles. But subtle was not our goal here today. As I finished each color, I placed it in a steamer basket or in a pan to wait for a turn for a steamer basket to then steam set for at least 30 minutes. Eventually, my Wool of the Andes yarn mop, which is non-superwash, couldn't really absorb much more color. It started sort of moving the color around on the surface. So I pre-soaked quickly a skein of Knit Pick Stroll that is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, in some water with vinegar, so then I could use that as the new yarn mop to soak up more of the colors. Here's a closer look at my double, oh dear, this is a closer look at my double steamer basket setup. So here at the top I have the steamer insert from my multi-pot. I'm going to go set that yarn aside, and then if I remove this, you can see that we have other yarn down here, and this is the pasta insert for the multi-pot. And so this allows me to dye different colorways here in one pot at the same time without getting, say, some orange transfer onto our green or some green onto that other orange colorway. And so it's just an efficient use of space. I absolutely love these pots. I have both the 12 quart and 8 quart version. And now I just have to finish steaming the rest of the yarn and then we'll be done soon. I did end up grabbing a second yarn mop because this Wool of the Andes started to get a lot of color on it, but that's so pretty. And I am so excited for this progression. This is just 4 of the colorways. There may be some purple pop that has not completely set. We will have to see. Oh, I didn't even think about the citric acid and our stellina yarn. Hopefully that's still going to be really sparkly. But anyway, now we are going to go and wash things. And as tempted as I am, I'm going to wait to lay out all of the colors until it is dry. But ooh, I'm so excited! I was a little nervous to wash the purple pop only because it did look like there was a tiny bit of residue at one point when I removed it, but that could have just been one little undissolved clump of dye. Washing it, there was maybe a hair of bleeding, but that resolved really quickly just using some dish soap. So, phew! Big sigh of relief. As I started washing all the rest of the colors, I tried to keep an eye on that yak. But with this yarn base wet, it's really hard to say how much pigment I got on there. During the dyeing process, I did try to pay attention to make sure it didn't get trapped beneath and have no color, but these neons are extremely subtle on that because it has that pigment already. But as I mentioned, it looks a lot darker while it is wet, so these bright fluorescent colors should show up more once it is dry. Once I finished washing all of the yarn and our 2 yarn mops, I put the yarn through my Nina Soft spin dryer to remove the excess liquid and then hung it up to dry so we could come back and look at the finished yarn, which is going to be beautiful and bright and bold. And of course, we'll also have to take a look at it under a black light because fluorescent colors are just extra fun. I absolutely love this. I am almost speechless, and part of me is like, I should just take lots of pretty shots of the yarn and let the yarn do the talking for itself. Bright fluorescent neon rainbows make me so happy. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, so I will talk all about it and we'll go in for some close-ups. All of the colors speckle pretty well, except for the fluorescent lemon. I think we'll see speckles under a black light. There are definitely little specks, but because yellow is a less saturated color overall, there's like a brightness, a highlighter quality to it, but you don't really feel the speckles in the way that we do with these other colors. Ooh, that purple pop! I haven't even arranged it all pretty yet, but let's go take a look with a black light. Ooh, this is so fun. I know that not everyone cares. Oh, I have to try to get the camera to show. You can certainly see the brightness from that fluorescent safety orange. That yellow pops so beautifully. The fluorescent fuchsia is a deeper pop that we see. And ooh, I think this is our yak. Oh, check out the glow on the yak. We'll take a closer look at all of that yak at the end. That is really, really cool. The lemon and the green look really, really similar to each other, likely because I think that the fluorescent pigment in the radioactive is the same as the fluorescent lemon. And so I think that's why they overall look very, very similar. Moving up, you can see that our frozen doesn't glow at all. And the purple pop glows in this really nice pink, very similar to our fluorescent fuchsia, because again, I think purple pop is the same pigment as fluorescent fuchsia, with some blues mixed in that give it that dark purple speckles on there. But here's another on that yak. I don't think I expected the fluorescence to pop on the deeper base like this, because at times when I've dyed with fluorescent and then over dyed it with black, we didn't really still see that glow, but maybe because there isn't other dye on here, they're natural fibers, we see this brightness in the speckles on the dark base. Again, we'll come back in and take another look at it once I have everything all arranged, but this is so cool. Again, I know not everyone has access to a black light in their home, and so this may not be a feature that you care about very much. But if you are wearing, say, a scarf knit with these colors and then go to a museum or something that has a black light exhibit, you're going to see something really fun, and I think that can be something that some people might want to search out. I am going to start separating these in a moment to the different yarn bases, so that way we can look at each of the, these sets on different yarn bases on their own. But looking at it all grouped together, the yak may throw it off a little bit because of the deepness. You can get a bit of a feel for how this color progression might go to give you a gradient, but there'll be a bit more blending to it. And especially if you do some sort of fading rounds, alternating skeins before switching from, say, the predominantly purple to the predominantly blue, blending things a little further, I think that this has amazing, amazing potential. Here we have the 4 different yarn bases: our Crazy 8 DK, our High Twist Superwash MCN, our Sparkle Soft, and then finally our yak. I would say that our merino based yarn all looks very similar. There are some dye lot differences. For example, the speckles are a lot heavier, say on this skein with purple pop, than some of the others. That isn't necessarily due to the twist of the Crazy 8 plumping up. It could be, but given that there's just some variety in how things are applied and to how much, I would be more inclined to say that it is a natural difference that we could see between them. Okay. As for our sparkle base, I have no idea if this is showing up well on camera. In person, I can see the little sparkles. We had citric acid on a sparkle base, and okay, we have the dyed sparkle base and a non-dyed sparkle base. And if I move my phone around, I can still see sparkle in both. And it's hard for me to say if I think that the bare is more sparkly than the dyed. I mean, I definitely still see glimmer and glint on both. But let me know what you think down in the comments. The concern with the sparkle base is that too much acid and heat can cause stellina to dull and lose its shimmer. This is not something that I have noticed definitively before, but it is something to keep in mind, and I'm not sure if I've ever done citric acid speckles on a stellina base today. So I think that I do want to try at some point to intentionally dull stellina, But today is not that day. We have a fun, sparkly version of our rainbow. The one thing I'll say about the That Yak yarn is that it was really hard to tell where I had applied dye to it or not. When it's wet, that base brownish gray color is a little harder to see these bright colors that really aren't that saturated on it. So it made it a little harder to tell where I was adding it. But I think we've got this gorgeous subdued rainbow here. And I am really excited about it. Okay, I just brought the Superwash MCN and the That Yak. And oh my goodness, this is fun. The Superwash MCN looks very much as expected, where that blue that is here and here does not fluoresce, and the rest of the colors do. The Yak, though, is spectacular, with the yellow, green, and orange really being the brightest stars. I think that if we were to just have, say, our purple or our fluorescent fuchsia, we could call those stars as well, but the brightness in these other colors really does pop. Anyway, I know that the black light looks aren't for everyone. It's not everyone's favorite aspect of dyeing yarn with fluorescent neon tones, but you have to admit that it does lead for some really, really fun visuals. Here is that same set that we just looked at in the closet under the black light with our That Yak and the Superwash High Twist MCN. Both are stunning, very visually different from one another, but I am having so much fun playing around with all these colorways on so many different yarn bases. And this High Twist Superwash MCN is so soft, and I know that I'm going to need to get more of this yarn when it becomes available. I really, really like it. Here are the 4 sets in the same order we had them at the beginning, with our That Yak Sparkle, Superwash MCN, and then Crazy 8 down at the end. And I think the sets are all fun and twisted up. Looking at it this way, you can get a little sense of how it might work in a project. Granted, the colors will blend more and those little pops of the second color in each skein will move around a bit, but I suppose there is a potential for a pooling project depending on how your gauge that you're knitting or crocheting with matches up with the size of the mini skein. We had 2 yarn mops from this project. One is Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn, and the other is Knit Picks Stroll fingering weight yarn. This worsted yarn is 100% Peruvian Highland wool, and the Stroll is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And we'll go a little closer, but you might notice a difference right away. We used both of these mops to wipe my hands on as we were dyeing yarn to remove color from my gloves, but we also use them to wipe up the counter in between different colors. And on the superwash yarn, we have more little speckles than we have on our Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn, where the colors are softer and a little more blown out. Now, non-superwash yarn does absorb color slower, and we did use different colors. We have more of the cool toned plus the green on this wool, and then on the stock yarn we have our warmer colors plus a little bit of green. So they aren't necessarily like equivalently dyed, but the feeling of the type of colorways do feel very different. Quickly, I had to come back into the closet to take a look at the yarn under the black light. And there is some glow that is present in that Wool of the Andes, which is below. It is less vibrant than what we see on the top with our Stroll, but there is a lot more fluorescent activity from the yellow and orange than there is from the green and purple. So that could be what we're seeing here. I know that I normally will use a superwash yarn like this for a yarn mop, but I think I do need to explore using non-superwash more for this type of technique. The one caveat I'll give is that if you have a non-superwash yarn, you want to have more care when you're rubbing it on a counter or using it to wipe your hands, just because agitation could lead to some felting. I don't see any issue with this skein, but that's worth keeping in mind. I absolutely love dyeing rainbow yarn, especially using these bright neon colors. I don't know if it's the 90s child in me or what, but I've just had so much fun with this project, and you will absolutely see many, many more rainbows, neon, muted colors, all kinds of rainbows, pastels from me in the future. I am really impressed that there isn't a huge difference that I observe from this high twist superwash MCN, which again is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. And it doesn't look like things are that much more blown out compared to, say, the 100% superwash merino or the merino nylon that is in the Stellina blend. So I am very, very excited to play with this more in the future. I love a good high twist yarn, but having that high twist MCN is just super exciting. So if this is a blend you would like to see me dye more of, please let me know down in the comments below. I have taken so many photographs of this yarn. It's something that I have a feeling is going to pop up on my Instagram over and over again. The colors just really warm my heart, and it just is so much fun. And since I don't have one of these sets for myself, I have a feeling I will be revisiting this colorway in the future. Maybe I need to do it on full skeins. This may be night 6 of the Summer Mini Skein mini-series, but the series is not over. Tomorrow night will be a bonus video featuring the full-size summer colorway that I created for these mystery sets, and I really hope that you will enjoy that video as well. If you missed a night of the Summer Mini Skein mini-series, there is a playlist that shows all of the videos, including the Mini Skein featured Dye Put Weekly episodes that I also shared this week. I figured let's lean into Mini Skein week and have all the videos feature them, except for tomorrow night, which will be full skeins. I absolutely love how tonight's colorway turned out, and in fact, I thought I had saved one for myself, but unfortunately I didn't. And when I went looking for it, I realized I forgot to hold it back. But that's not so bad, because it just means I'm gonna have to dye this or something very similar again. And I love these fluorescent acid dye colors, these bright neon colors, so much that I don't really need an excuse to go do it again. But I have been thinking, maybe not about this exact colorway, but something really, really similar to do for a fade sweater. So I'm thinking about how I might want to achieve it with these colors, but that is something that will probably be a dyeing to knit video a long time from now, because by the time I dye the yarn and then make the sweater, it's going to take a while. So I'm not working on it yet, but it's a vision in my head that I hope to achieve at some point. Speaking of not needing an excuse to play with these colors more, I do have leftover dye from this video that I used in multiple other videos and even a live stream that came out probably a month or so ago. So there's still more neon content that's already filmed and coming up. So please make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the colorful fun. If you love the yarn that I dye, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, where you can find hundreds of skeins of hand-dyed yarn featured in my videos. And there are also some opportunities for you to become a lab partner and get shoutouts in an episode of Dye Put Weekly. You can find links to all of this down in the video description. I want to thank you all for your support of the Summer Mini Skein mini-series and all of my yarn dyeing journey in general. I have so much fun playing with color and yarn and sharing my learning adventures here, and thank you so much for supporting it. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and once again, stay tuned because tomorrow night we'll have one final video for this summer mini skein mini series on full skeins, but still one more video, and I am really excited for you to see what I have created. Thank you so much for watching.